What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Sloppy Saturdays. And today we are talking about if it's realistically possible that Arch Manning could play another 2 more seasons in college football. Now, these comments sparked from Steve Sarkisian talking about how much Arch Manning loves Texas and how much money he's making through NIL, through his endorsements, and how he doesn't need to go into the NFL right away. Now, we talked about last year the possibility of Arch Manning being in last year's draft class. We thought if Arch Manning would have done everything that he wanted to, maybe win a national championship, win a Heisman, one or the other, he would have been in last year's draft class. I talked about it. Even after his season last year, I do believe he would have went number 1 overall over Fernando Mendoza just based on Arch Manning's ceiling. But now we're having the same conversations this year already. Is it possible for Arch Manning to play 2 more seasons in college football? I'm going to talk about how I think both sides are a possibility. I think there's a chance definitely that he leaves after this year. I think that's the bigger possibility. But I also think there's a chance that he can stay as well. We're going to talk about why both are a possibility. Now, I do believe there is a stronger possibility than not that Arch Manning definitely goes into the 2027 draft class. Why I believe this is because the way this Texas team is constructed, I believe it's for a 1-year national championship window, and they went all in with Arch Manning through the transfer portal moves that they have made. Now, I thought they did phenomenal in the transfer portal. They bring in arguably the best transfer portal head in Cam Coleman to pair up with Arch Manning. You also bring in 2 running backs that have Jahmyr Gibbs type burst with a Raleek Brown and a Hollywood Smothers. You also have Ryan Wingo, who's a junior, and then you also have Emmett Mosley, who's a junior. I think all the offensive linemen for Arch Manning right now are upperclassmen. You have a defensive star in Colin Simmons that's going to enter the 2027 draft class. So when you look at the core of this Texas team and how it's constructed to go all in for this year. And all the star players that I named, I believe are going to go into the 2027 draft class, definitely more than not. That's why I believe there's realistically a very slim chance that Arch Manning plays 2 more years in college football. Like I said, when we looked last year, how that season started against Ohio State, Florida, Georgia, this Texas team did not do what it wanted to do. When we looked at Arch Manning being a Heisman candidate, he was very fastly taken out of that conversation. And again, for a team that was the favorite to win the national championship last year, they didn't even make the college football playoffs. So it was a pretty easy choice for Arch Manning to come back. And like I said, with this roster, how it's constructed, with all the upperclassmen talent that they have, these guys are going into the 2027 draft class. For Arch Manning to stay another year in college football, they would have to do something very similar to this year, where they would have to go all in on the transfer portal again, bring in a lot of weapons and guys that could make Arch Manning go for another national championship type of run. That's the only realistic way I could see Arch Manning staying. Now, a couple of other ways I could see Arch Manning staying. One, I think it's very simple. When you look at his uncles, Eli, Peyton, they all played pretty much 4 full years in college football. When you look at Peyton Manning, he played 11 games 3 times and then 12 games. And then when you look at Eli, he only played 6 games his freshman year, but then he played 2 years with 11 games, maybe 3 years with 11 games, 11 or 12 games. They both have over 10,000 yards passing. Like, they really got full 4 years of experience as a starter. When you look at Arch Manning, yeah, this is going to be his 4th year in college football, and learning behind somebody is definitely more valuable than not having any experience in college football in those 2 years. But realistically, even after this year, he's only going to have 2 years starting in college football. When we saw his sophomore season, he did come in and gadget run plays, and he did fill in for when Quinn Ewers was injured, but he doesn't have near the experience that the other Mannings have. And like we said, with all of his opportunities in college football, it makes it a possibility that he could stay for another season. The other real reason why I believe he can stay in college football 2 years is because if we think about it, when we saw Eli not want to go to the Chargers and get to go to the Giants, it could really depend on who has the number 1 overall pick. Like, Arch Manning could, and this Texas team could do everything that they want to do. But if we see a team like the Jets, who have had organization failure for the last 50, 60 years, pick at number 1, and Arch Manning is slotted to go at the number 1 overall pick, that could be a way where Arch Manning could stay another year in college football. Like we said, with his opportunities and how we've seen on his Manning family history, I don't know if the Manning family is going to want Arch Manning to go to the Jets. Now, I think this is definitely harder than past years. Like when Eli did it, I think it was a little bit easier to not want to go to a team. I think it's kind of hard now in this day and age generation. The only way you could do it, in my opinion, is to go back to school. I don't think you could realistically say you don't want this team to draft you, but still enter the NFL draft. I think that makes it a lot harder. And we saw Caleb Williams try to do a similar thing. There was rumors that he didn't want to go to the Bears. He ends up going to the Bears. I thought it was a phenomenal decision in hindsight now, because I think the Bears made every right move from coaching to personnel move. They're looked at now as a really good organization. So things have changed really fast. And then the other reason why I think it is possible for Arch Manning to possibly play 2 more years in college football is if it's just very similar to last year, where he doesn't get done everything that he wants to get done. Maybe if Texas has an early college football playoff exit, he doesn't win the Heisman, that can make him play another year at Texas for sure. But like we said, with all these possibilities, when we look at, again, Arch Manning's uncles playing really 4 years as a starter, and then when you also look at maybe possibly a team that could be picking at the top, or if we look similar to last year as well, if he doesn't get everything he wants to done in college football this year, he could play another year. But my issue, like I said, and why I think this is not going to happen, is because the way Texas is constructed right now, it's for a 1-year national championship type of window. This year in Arch Manning's tenure at Texas is going to be the best setup he's going to have in his tenure at Texas, with all the transfer portal moves they made and their upperclassmen stars. That's why I believe Arch Manning is going to come out after this year, because he's not going to get a better opportunity at a national championship in 2027. But yeah, that wraps up this short little episode of Sloppy Saturdays, talking about the possibility of Arch Manning playing 2 years in college football. Like I said, it's a scenario that could definitely be possible depending on how the season shapes out, and you never truly know. And we've discussed it last year with Dante Moore. Dante Moore was a top 5 slated pick. Oregon had the resources definitely for him to have success this year. He stays in college football based on the way his season ends, and it's becoming all the more possible for players to do everything that they want to do to best set up their future with NIL, with transfer portal. So, again, I think it could go both ways. I think the more realistic scenario, like we said, is Arch Manning coming out after this year into that loaded 2027 QB class, just by the way that Texas program right now and their roster is structured. That wraps up this episode of Sloppy Saturdays. Drop down your thoughts below on Arch Manning possibly playing 2 more years in college football, or is he going to come out in the 2027 draft class? Arch Manning is definitely always our hot topic for videos, arguably the most popular player right now in college football. So I expect you guys to go crazy on this podcast and on this YouTube video. That wraps up this episode of Sloppy Saturdays, and we are out.